Welcome to the Reclaim Leader podcast. I'm Jason Tucker.
And I'm Jesse Skiffington.
We're two pastors in the trenches who are passionate about church health for greater gospel impact.
We share the ups and downs of ministry, strategies that worked for us,
and some that didn't.
Best practices and practical tools for church leadership.
The goal, to help all of our churches flourish. Let's get started.
See another sunrise, sing a little song.
It is January. It still feels like the new year. We've already said Happy New Year. We said that last week. I'm going to say it again. Happy New Year. It's it's all systems go though. Things did not wait to pick up speed. It feels like we hit the ground running in 2025, which I don't know how I feel about it. I don't think I have time to feel about it, honestly. I'm just just moving forward. One of the best things I did though, Jesse, I don't know if you had a little time to get away. One of the best things I did was I took a couple days. I had some writing that I wanted to do, but I actually went to Princeton Seminary, and right now, and by the way, drove by all of our old haunts.
Nice.
I even got coffee at the Starbucks we used to always go to. And then, but the library was empty because all the students were away. So I had that giant library to myself. It was sort of like heaven. You know, I felt like that Twilight Zone episode with the guy and all he wants to do is read, and there's like a nuclear holocaust, and then he steps on his reading glasses. Anyway.
Oh man, that's brutal. I've never seen that one.
Man, you got to. Burgess Meredith is the main character. Anyway, I digress. Happy New Year, buddy. I feel like so much is in front of us. I'm excited. How are you feeling? You feeling rested? I know you've had a ton of things going on in church.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's a good question for all of us to ask as leaders in the church. How am I feeling going into this new year? And I would say I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it. And I'm also going, how am I already tired a week and a half in? Like, this is not.
How'd that happen?
How did that happen? So I think I'm looking forward to it, but there's a lot of things for us. I mean, we've talked about this before, depending on where your budget cycles hit and all that stuff. So we got a lot of our strategic planning and budgeting that happens this time of year, and it's fine. It's part of the deal, but I'm always coming out of the back end of Christmas going, maybe we need to make a shift there to a different time of year, and we've kicked that around. But yeah, overall, awesome. It's so much fun to celebrate Christmas. Got a little time away with family. We didn't go anywhere. We just stayed home and relaxed a little bit. And my wife, Callie, is awesome enough on her birthday. When I said, what do you want to do for your birthday? She said, let's go to Top Golf. And I was like, I knew I married you for a reason. So anyway,
I knew.
I knew. So
right.
She wanted to do something we'd all enjoy. And so we had some fun and got some downtime, and now right back into the swing of things, and we're going for it. So I'm sure some version of that story is what everybody has lived these last couple of weeks.
Yeah, totally. And as we're thinking about themes for this January and February, back on the podcast, I was thinking about what are some of the biggest issues that I'm hearing from churches about what's holding them back from getting where they hope to be.
Yeah.
And I want to, let me just pause and talk a little bit about, sometimes the relentless goal setting sounds exhausting.
Yeah.
Or it sounds too corporate-y or entrepreneurial in the sense of like, everyone's got to hustle, and it's all about getting to where.
Got to get our strategic plan, Jason.
Yeah. So there's something that's not helpful sometimes, because I think sometimes you might want to manufacture things that you don't need to do because you feel like you're supposed to be doing them. On the other hand, I think one of the biggest obstacles that we have to overcome all the time is just sort of a lack of intentionality. It's very easy to drift. Yeah. And when you drift, it's really hard to get where you want to go. I mean, I think it was Michael Hyatt who always said, you never drift into health. Yeah. Health always takes great intention. And so I don't know, that's the spirit of what we're talking about today. And one of those areas of health, I think, is in our volunteer systems in the church. Yeah. Because one of the things I hear over and over again is people aren't volunteering like they used to. And we talk about the professionalization of ministry and how people would rather pay people to do the stuff that people used to do. What do you do with all that? There's a part of me that envies newer churches or mega churches, because it feels like, this may be an incorrect perception, but it feels like they have all their volunteer systems dialed in. Like they have job descriptions, they have clear expectations. But if you're in a church that's been around a while or a church that's revitalizing, you're filled with older church systems that are built on volunteer preferences and skills. Here's what I mean. So years ago, we had a lady who she did the flower ministry, and the flower ministry consisted of making sure that there were flowers on the communion table for our traditional service, and would often then take those flowers and put them into individual arrangements that would go to the homebound. She would also oversee like the Christmas poinsettias. There was like a list of things, and she loved doing it, and that's what she did, and she was the flower person. And I remember I got wind that she wasn't happy. Like, what do we? And it turns out it was this idea that she really wanted to hand it off. She felt like, she was too old. She had done her time, if you will, and it was time to hand it off, but nobody wanted to take it. Where are all the young people? You keep reaching all these new young people. Where are they all? Why aren't they stepping up? And really the issue has to do with a million issues in the life of the church. And that is the younger people weren't stepping up because they didn't want to do it the way you do it.
Yeah.
And there's a power struggle going on where she would sort of take on an apprentice, if you will, and tell them this is how you do it. And the second that they wanted to do it a different way, they were not invited back.
Right.
And so it's like, I want someone to take this, but I only want them to take it in the way that I have done it forever. And the job sort of morphed around her preferences.
That's right.
And that's a problem because it's really hard to hand off someone else's preferences.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I mean, we've probably said this a ton of times over the years too, but nobody wants to babysit somebody else's version of something, right?
Yeah.
So whether it's a program or a volunteer role, if you're just looking to hand something off and have it run exactly the same way as you had done it before, what kind of vision is that? There's no excitement for someone to take it, make it their own, and do something with it. And so I think you're right. I think we get stuck around some of the personalities or preferences related to how things are done. Not a lack of willingness always, sometimes maybe, but often it's somebody's holding on to a certain version of it and has a hard time letting go. So it's so funny you mentioned the flower ministry. I mean, that happened here at Marine View too. And I'm sure it happens a lot of places, kind of that little niche thing. It does matter. It's a good thing to have poinsettias at Christmas and flowers at Easter and all that. And yet there's a certain kind of personality that's drawn to that wants to have it just so. And anyway. Yeah.
But I will say that same issue has popped up in a million different volunteer roles around the church. I've done it this way forever. I want to hand it off. It's time for younger people to take it, but the younger people don't want to take it.
That's right.
And I'll say a couple of things. Let me say something positive about the older generation, mostly boomers and builders, who I would say their dedication of time to the life of the church is unparalleled. It is unmatched. They think the right thing to do is you volunteer at church and you spend a lot of time doing it, and it matters and it's important. And they have a level of time dedication that's just different than younger generations.
Yeah.
It's not the younger generations don't care. It's just the amount of time they're willing to give is just something different.
Well, and all the competing opportunities that are available to people now compared to maybe a couple of generations ago. I think there is a shift in mentality there that's tough. And we had an amazing missions team here that was essentially the same core group of people for almost 30 years who carried that and stewarded that ministry and did a lot of incredible things. But as they began to get towards later seasons of life where it was harder and harder to be as proactive, we got really stale in our approach. And then when it came to the handoff, it was like, how do you hand off 30 years of institutional knowledge and all kinds of stuff, right? And so we ended up having to, for lack of a better way of talking about it, kind of dismantle the whole thing, not because it was bad, but in order to build something back, we had to give space for a new group of people with a fresh approach to come in. And of course, that came with some hurt feelings and some people that felt like their work hadn't been honored or stuff. And so it's tricky to navigate this piece in our, like you said, our longer standing churches. There's a long legacy of volunteering and serving around people's ways of doing it. So it's a tough handoff.
And volunteering itself has changed in a couple of ways, not just generationally, but since the pandemic. We just saw a noticeable difference in volunteering since the pandemic. And it really had to do with commitment.
Yeah.
You used to joke about this, about millennial commitments, which is really funny. But it's, back when I was just thinking about the millennials that I had in youth ministry and their ability to commit to something. It was just really funny. But I think since the pandemic, what we're seeing is kind of a carpe diem mentality of their lives. So the millennials are now the parents of young families who are theoretically the exact demographic that we're trying to reach. And what I'm seeing in them and some of their older kind of Gen X counterparts who may also be on the young family cusp is there's a sense of, hey, the pandemic taught us we don't know how much time we have. Time is the most valuable commodity, and we need to be spending time together as a family. We need to do the things that we want to do because we don't know how long we have to do them. We're going to take that vacation we've been putting off. We're going to make the most of our time together because I'm working all week and I don't have a lot of available time. I don't make up for it on the weekend, or Sunday's the only day we as a family could sleep in because we have sports or whatever on Saturday. Right, wrong, whatever. This is just kind of how they think it. So volunteering becomes, oh yeah, I'll volunteer, but the amount they're willing to do that usually is something less, or they don't want to be signed up to something for a long period of time. It's sort of like, oh, hey, it works out this week. Let me jump in.
Yeah, we've had to work really hard on what I call not changing the rules halfway through the game with people. Yeah. Somebody says I can serve 1 week a month, whatever, one Sunday a month, then that's what we have to honor that. And it's hard because we're always needing volunteers. And there's the temptation to say, hey, you did such a good job. Could you do another week this month? Somebody couldn't make it. And I think that there's a little bit of a hesitancy, I think, from some. If I say yes to a small thing, they might ask me to do more and more and more. And the other thing I think that happens is I've noticed is people are willing to give some time to it, but not some leadership to it. If that makes sense. It's like,
it does.
You give me a concrete task to do and I'll decide whether I have the space in my life to do it or not, clearly define it, and I'll make it happen. But lead a team, organize a group, that's a tougher ask. And I think, again, we're talking about overcoming obstacles. I think those are some of the things, just the realities that are out there that we're helping navigate these younger generations through, and knowing that they have a lot of gifts and skills to bring to the table, but how do we do it well with this new group coming up? Yeah,
that's a great segue. So let's get into these are some of the problems that we've noticed. And this was all, we've definitely had trouble keeping up with just having enough volunteers to do all the things as our church continues to grow. But it all came to a head this last fall when a really dedicated member who's in the young family demographic basically said, Jason, the volunteer experience is terrible. And here's a few reasons why. And that got us thinking. In fact, we worked all the rest of the fall problem solving this so that by the time we got to 2025, we can have a better plan in place. Not perfect, just better, to help our volunteers feel valued, give them right-sized opportunities, et cetera. But that's sort of baked into the problems here. That's how it all came about. And man, that was a tough conversation.
Yeah, those sting, don't they?
Yeah, right. And it was totally out of love and dedication to the church. Like, hey, I can handle it. Although what I was hearing between the lines was, I don't really want to handle it anymore. So it needs to get fixed.
It probably took a lot for them, someone like that, to get to the point where they're like, I got to say something. And it's for your benefit. Those sting, though. They're hard in the moment.
Yeah, they're painful.
And then you step back and you go, you know what? Let's do better. So
exactly. So these are the things that we identified that were going on, at least in our church. Number one is one of the worst things that can happen to a volunteer is to feel like they weren't needed or there was not enough for them to do when they showed up.
Yeah.
Man, that one kills me because we really do. We're desperate for volunteers. And for whatever reason, the ask, it wasn't clear enough, or we weren't clear on exactly what was needed before making the ask.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we need 4 volunteers to do what? Why do you need 4?
Yeah.
Do you need 4 because that sounds right, or do you actually have something for 4 people to do?
I like
And it
that.
sounds dumb, but it's a question that doesn't get asked.
I mean,
often.
think, man, you stifle participation. If someone shows up and they're not needed, they go, "Oh, I guess I can ignore it whenever they say I need volunteers," right? So, where does that show up the most? Where do you see the people show up to volunteer and there's not enough to do? Is there a particular area that's happening most, or is that kind of across the board?
So we've seen it. I've seen it in 2 different ways. One is with events. So, for example, our Tower Hill Day that we have inflatables and pancakes in the beginning of the fall as our big fall kickoff. And we need volunteers to be at the inflatables to sort of police them and make sure that, no kids aren't stepping on each other's heads too much and all that.
Yeah.
But, and this year there was we had a staff person that was in charge of that, and they transitioned out. And so that stuff fell on me and some other people that had never done it.
Yeah.
And we ended up giving the wrong size time commitment. Well, that's the next problem, actually.
Yeah.
But we also we overestimated the number of people we needed. And so there were some people saying, yeah, I showed up to be at the inflatable. There were 2 other people there, and there was nothing for me to do.
Yeah.
So
Go
and
bounce,
that's happened not just
get up on the inflatable and have a good time.
Yeah. But there's a couple of areas. It happens with events. The other place it happens is just like that situation I said with the flowers.
Yep.
So, and I think this did happen with this person, is that they bring somebody in. We made an ask to get this person to go work with the flower lady. And because she wasn't, quote unquote, doing it right, the flower lady just did it all herself while the
I'll
person
just do it
watched.
for you. Yeah.
And the report back was, well, you don't really need me.
Yeah, you already have somebody.
You already have somebody doing it.
Yeah. For us, I would say the events thing is something we've experienced before, where sometimes it's an organization issue. We didn't get organized enough to deploy people the right way. And sometimes we just frankly have too many awesome people that show up, and we're like, well, just enjoy it. And yeah, it feels a little funny. I've also noticed it. We'll do from time to time, like building lunches after the service for, Tacoma Rescue Mission, or, little one-off service type things. And what happens sometimes, we've had to work hard at this, we have to save some of the work for people to do, because there'll be a handful of people that just crank it out. And then everybody else is excited about coming and participating. And there's nothing left to do. And so just trying to manage those asks and make sure that when we are asking, there's something meaningful, even if it's small, but something to contribute and to honor that request for a volunteer. And so I like that. I think it's really important that you mentioned that one.
Yeah. And it's a planning problem. It's just, have we really thought through what the opportunities are? And is there?
So when we have, with our multiple services, we hold back some of the supplies for the lunch building so that every service has an opportunity and all that. So you just got to think it through, and because it can be done. Yeah.
All right. The second problem is something that comes up, especially if you ask them to help out with our next gen ministry or Sunday school or be a small group leader. And that is, what if someone asks me a question and I don't know the answer? Like it's about capability. Yep. What if I don't know enough? And we get people say that even for guest services, and guest services largely is like, you're just saying hi and good morning and you're helping them find a seat or go to Sunday school. But the fear is, what if someone asks a question about church and I don't know the answer? There's a lot of fear around not knowing.
Kind of risky to put yourself out there and maybe be in that position. Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing that we talk about is just making sure that everybody's trained up and that we think about how to make it easy. How do we make the volunteer experience as easy as it can be? So for example, if you're nervous to be a small group leader, well, we have a lot of options like Right Now Media or something where you don't have to deliver the content. You just lead questions that are already candid to you.
Right.
You could do it that way. And you're so good with people and you're a good facilitator. Don't worry about the biblical questions. You can simply say, I'm not sure about that. Or what do you guys think about that? Or, hey, let's ask Pastor Chris or Pastor Jason or Pastor Teresa. Let's find out together. Yeah. Those are all okay answers. You don't have to worry about, somebody's got
Yeah.
a bunch of Bible trivia.
But
You
you
don't
got
have
to have training that gives them permission to
Yeah.
answer that way. And I think your training idea is spot on, and setting people up for success. Where is the communication that I can direct people to about this thing or that thing? What is on our website? Where do I go? Who can I point them toward to seek the information that they're wondering about? And so part of that just really solid communication with our volunteers. And it doesn't help a whole lot to do the old, God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called, or like, don't do pastory things. I mean, that may be true. I mean, people always, the right people are always a little bit shy about their own abilities, right?
Yeah.
We have an elder come on, they're like, who am I to serve as an elder? And I said, the fact that you asked that question means you're the right person, right? So there is, people are being humble, or maybe just truly worried and about where do I get the information I'll need? So baking that into your training, and then consistently communicating about that, especially for our welcome folks on Sunday. If somebody has a question, where do I go? Well, we walk with them to the next steps desk, and we hand them off to the person that does know.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it's just making sure that you're really good about communicating that, because probably the worst thing you could do is just be like, don't worry about it. All right. Yeah, it's fine.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's not fine. Like, no, like, give me some direction.
Yeah.
Our next gen team does this really well. So when they make an ask for, hey, we need more help with next gen, the first thing they say is, don't worry, you don't have to lead. Because they don't want you leading if you've never done it before.
Yep.
We have you in one of our assistant roles, and we have it all spelled out for you. And then if or when you are ready to lead, we have everything done. We print out all the material. We have all the icebreakers done. Everything's ready to go. It's literally as plug and play as it can be.
I love it.
And that puts people at ease. And also just to know, I don't have to be in charge the first time.
Yeah. I mean, that's huge ask. Yeah. We do a shadow thing as well, where especially in our youth and children's environments, we'll have people come and shadow someone for 2 or 3 times. What's the environment like? Is this a place where I feel called to serve and capable to serve? And it kind of allows that volunteer they're shadowing to cast some vision for what it can look like. Where did they start? And what's it been like to take on that role? And what has it meant to them? So I think there's a lot of little simple tweaks that you can do to help people get past that. I don't, who am I? And I don't know. And where do I find the information? And that kind of objection.
Yeah. Problem 3 is it was the wrong sized opportunity, where somebody says it was more than I expected, or it was less than I expected. It's sort of like, it's related to the first one. I didn't have enough to do, but it was an ask that wasn't really thought through.
Yep.
Where people feel blindsided.
Yeah. We call it the bait and switch here.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you said it that way too. So
yeah, because isn't that kind of what it is? It's either we haven't thought it through enough on what we're actually asking them to do, and it's way more than we thought, or way less than we thought, or something, or we asked them to do one version, and then we found out we actually have a need for something else, and instead of going and finding another volunteer, we take that volunteer and stretch them beyond where they said yes to go. So we've really broken an agreement with them, Jason. And I mean, you can tell I get a little fired up about this one. Like, this is, to me, you can't change the rules halfway through the game on someone unless you both agree. It's not wrong to say, hey, Jason, I know you signed up for one. Would you ever consider adding a second Sunday? And if not, no worries. I know we agreed to one, but just give it some thought and prayer, and let's talk again. Like, if you're going to change the rules, it has to be a mutually agreed upon shift. And so just, again, we're coming back to that communication piece, but this is one that you can tell we've had some places along the way where somebody started with 1 week, and all of a sudden I find out they're down in the trenches of children's ministry 3 or 4 times a month. And that's not what they said yes to. And then they burn out and they move on and they're frustrated and all that stuff.
Well, that leads right to number 4. Number 4 is what I call the Hunger Games problem, and that is I didn't volunteer as tribute. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's it.
Like, right? I didn't want to do it forever. It turned into a life sentence, and that is a real problem. And
how do we solve that one?
Of the pandemic, we had a lot of every week volunteers.
Sure.
I say a lot. I don't know what the number really was. It feels like a lot.
Yeah.
We had I would say, sizable group. They were every week volunteers. And when everything opened back up, a year later after the lockdown, they didn't come back as volunteers.
Yep.
And what did that tell us? It told us a really hard truth. They didn't miss it. They probably felt overburdened and burned out
Yep.
by their level of
Yeah.
volunteering. And
Yeah.
we just can't do that to people.
Yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned this one, because I do think there is awesome people are awesome, and they're going to stick it out because they see the need, and they will probably volunteer way longer than is good for them or for the church. And we found that same thing. Probably the clearest place where I saw that happen was with our coffee ministry, of all places. I mean, we had it in all kinds of places, but primarily there, where a few people had just been so faithful for so long and kind of out of sight, out of mind, taken for granted or whatever. And it was like, for them, the pandemic was like their sentence had been commuted. Like they were free finally from the chains of the coffee ministry. And I think it kind of caused us all to go, wow, we just really missed how much of a grind people were willing to put up with, because they're such gracious disciples and they love Jesus and they love people. And that's not fair or right or good, not healthy for them, certainly, and not healthy for us in the end.
Yeah.
So what do we do about that one?
Well, the solution has to do with problem number 5. So I'll get to that in a second. But I will say the first 4 problems are all about the volunteer opportunities.
Yeah.
Are we making sure that they are right sized? What do I mean by right sized? I mean, so again, back to our Tower Hill Sunday, when we had our people at the inflatables, it really did go great, but it did bring up some problems.
Sure.
And we had them signed up for shifts that were way too long.
Yeah.
So we had them up for like 2 hours.
That's a long time to stand by.
That's way too much time for most people to want to just jump in and help. I know people might not think that's a big deal, but it is a big deal, especially if people don't feel like they really needed to be there for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we see that. We see that in, have we overscheduled? So these first 4 problems are about how do we right size the opportunity? And it's just about thinking it through.
Yeah.
But then the 5th problem is there's got to be some sort of overarching structure to hold it together. And that has to do with your system. What's your volunteer system? How are you tracking volunteers and volunteer opportunities? This is the key, I think. And this is the key we're working on the most, because what I want to know is not just, first of all, I want to know, what are all the volunteer opportunities at the church at any given moment that we can invite people to?
Right.
We did not have a system for that. So what was happening is, in all the different silos where they needed volunteers, missions, next gen, pick a thing, they weren't talking to each other about who was volunteering. And so then the same people, because they're so capable, will get asked to volunteer in all of these ministry areas.
Yeah. The super volunteer is what we call them, right?
Exactly right. And they would say yes, because they have big hearts. They want to do it. And then they would get burned out.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's also, it robs us of the opportunity to invite new people, because we don't know what all the volunteer opportunities are.
Right. Yeah.
So we had to figure out what's the system of what are the opportunities available at any given moment, and then how we track our volunteers to make sure we're simply not asking people. If they're an every other weeker for Sunday school, I don't want to ask them to do something else.
Yeah.
And I know the whole thing, like, don't let them say their no for them. Sometimes you have to say their no for them.
Yeah.
In the name of protecting them and trying to help them not burn out.
Well, and frankly, if we want to peel it back to a stewardship of all the community, when people step in to serve in some way, it's an opportunity for spiritual growth and deepening in community and fellowship and all those things, as well as providing a function of something we need to have happen in the church. And so if we're going to the same people over and over again, and there's a bunch of people sitting on the sidelines because we don't have a good system in place to know where the gaps are and how to invite new people into those, then I think we're doing a disservice to our discipleship overall too. And so there's more at stake than just burning some people out even. Yeah. So I'm speaking as if we have some system that's really working. We don't. I mean, I think this is a challenge for churches, big, small, mid-size. How does that work for your particular kind of context as a church? What would a system look like for you? And I think it's notoriously difficult for whatever reason. And maybe you got a solution for us, Jason, right? That you guys are working on.
I'll tell you what we're trying.
Yeah. But I think the challenge I've noticed is church can be like herding cats. You don't always know who is doing what. And ministries do tend to silo themselves out, and there's not always overlapping communication. And so how do you create a centralized place for that through your database or something? So I'll be curious, how are you guys moving in that direction of kind of a comprehensive volunteer strategy?
So what we're trying to do is we said, okay, well, what's our system going to be? Mm-hmm. And our first thing was, we had just 2 years ago, we had just switched church management software to ChurchStack, which used to be I think they bought PushPay, and we were PushPay customers. I don't know how it all goes, but
yeah, sure.
But we switched to them, and it has the feature for us to track volunteers, send automated emails, texts, to have really good communication, and to know at any given time what were the opportunities. And I mean, we had to build it all, and we're still building it. So. But it has that capability already. So we're like, well, let's not reinvent the wheel here. This already exists in our church management software. Yeah. So let's build it out. And our experiment was, so for our Christmas on the Hill event, our big outreach event, I said, again, we lost that staff member who did the logistics for that. And so I took it on my plate and I said, I want to do this because I want to figure out our church management software a little bit. So I just know how to do it. I said, so let's build the volunteer list from here. And we did, and it was great. And we're going to do that more and more. Now that we sort of get a sense of how it works and what you have to do, we're going to do it through that software. And then the goal is if we could get all of our volunteers to set up their profile on the church man, that's always the challenge, right? Nobody wants to do that.
Yeah.
You could really track things really, really well. So that's our system. But then the other thing we noticed is that we really need a face for volunteers. We need somebody who that's the volunteer person where they just have eyes on this whole thing and they become the go-to person to sign up with. And then this person can also have knowledge of what all the opportunities are and be able to do it in a relational way. And so we identified someone. We had brought someone on part-time to help with some admin, and she's really good at it. And we experimented with having her go out into the lobby and do some signups at Christmas. It worked great. So I think the answer for us is, and we're a larger church, but I think for a lot of churches, it's do you have a person who's got eyes on it?
Yeah, point person.
And then what's your way of tracking it? What's your software? And it maybe you do something like Planning Center, or you could do an Excel spreadsheet or whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
But I think those help to sift through some of the issues with volunteering.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. We're kind of mid-sized church, and we think in terms of like point people sometimes. Sometimes it's a staff person. That's awesome if that works, but that's not always our reality. So point person, a key volunteer that functions in a little higher level role because they have the time and desire and ability to do it or something. But having someone, or maybe it's a couple people that want to team up to do that. But I think that's helpful. Whether you're a small church like the one I grew up in my small hometown, where you have one person that kind of knows where the opportunities are, what we're doing, it kind of coordinates. And I think they're event coordinator-ish kind of personalities, and they're they kind of gravitate towards galvanizing people and plugging people in. And the things where the reason I think I'm glad you dove into it to understand it, but I think as pastors, or at least I'll speak for myself, I struggle because I don't always like asking people to do stuff. I'm like, shouldn't that be my job? Shouldn't that be? And so I struggle with that. But some people that are like truly galvanizer type people that love to invite others in, that's the kind of personalities you want in that role. They know the opportunities. They go, oh, you should meet so-and-so. You should meet Heather and Michelle. They're awesome. They work with our MV kids, and I'm sure they'll have some ideas for where you could plug in. Let's go. Let me go introduce you. And you need that kind of dynamic. I think. And then there's got to be an administrative backbone to it too. And
Yeah.
anyway. So yeah, I like that, Jason. I think thinking in terms of a system that helps us to understand who all is doing what, how long they've been doing it. Do they need a break? Do we need somebody new? There's just a lot of factors when it comes to volunteers, but getting systematic about it maybe is the best thing, whatever size church we have.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like looking under the hood and see how things really are, rather than just sort of like, because the pressure is, we talk about this all the time, but the pressure is got to get to Sunday.
Yep.
So the pressure is I got to find volunteers for the kindergarten, or I got to for the nursery, and I'm going to call the same people I called last week because that's the most efficient way of doing it. And they love serving in those areas. And that's all fine. But at some point, there's sort of this cumulative burnout that happens. And unless you're intentional or you have eyes on exactly what's going on, it's really hard to have a healthy system. So this is really the beating heart of this episode is, taking a look under the hood and what are you doing and what are the problems, identify them. And then maybe the answer is a better system.
You just gave me more work to do. I'll tell you that. But truly, I think about some of the people, the coffee ministry team that I talked about there. And had we had a better system, we would have said, hey, Coralie been doing this almost every week for 5 years. We need to give her an off ramp. Maybe she still loves it, but she needs the option at least to take a break. So a system would allow us to think in terms of on ramps and off ramps and seasons of ministry and taking breaks and trying to steward our volunteer pool well. So systems it is. So let's all get to work. Jason gave us an assignment, so we got to go.
Well, hey, thanks everyone for listening and being a part of this community. If you're new with us, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. You can reach out to us, and you probably have a lot of great ideas with volunteering. Send us an email. Help us out, Jason or Jesse at reclaimleader.com. Excited, Jesse, about what's coming up this year. And for everybody else, just want to encourage you to share and like this podcast. Leave us a review on your platform of choice. That's always great. Helps other people to find us, and it helps us do what we're passionate about. And that's helping you to do everything you can as pastors and leaders to grow healthy churches. So, and we're still trying to do that. So we're in the trenches with you.
It's a work in progress, Jason. It's a work in progress for sure. And 374 episodes in, we're still sorting it all out. And, every day is a new challenge, a new opportunity. But we're here, and God is doing things in the midst of our churches. And I'm sure those listening in, there's lots of great things that God's up to in your community. So keep up the good work. We're grateful to be in it with you.
Ministry is hard. It is so much better when we do it together. All right. Take care, everyone.